Geometry Dash's official levels were never meant to change. However, you would be surprised to see how many times RobTop was forced to edit these levels. Whether it was changing very small details to improve a level or just to disallow people to choose them. Keep in mind that to this day there are still so many issues within the main levels, yet RobTop refuses to fix them as they are not as important as the mysterious changes that I'm gonna present to you today. The first change to ever occur to the main levels was back in 2013, when RobTop decided to change very small yet effective details in Back on Track. You see, back in 2013, RobTop was still not concerned whether he was gonna work on Geometry Dash for years to come, or whether he should start a new game. This decision was to be decided by the Geometry Dash players back then. But it was RobTop's prerogative to keep the game as enjoyable as possible, to make the game expand in popularity, so he can make a living out of it. This is also one of the reasons why RobTop always made sure that the main levels are enjoyable to play and, most importantly, have no bugs in them. One of the changes he decided to make after the level already came out were the following. Surprisingly, there was an extra block added in here to prevent your icon of doing an early jump and fall into the spike, leading you to lose. Remember that deaths like this can lead early players to dislike the game and, as a result, quit the game entirely. I like to believe that back then, RobTop used to watch other players play the main levels to see if there are any unfortunate places like this, or even this. Newer players would be devastated dying at these parts only because the level design was poorly made, which is why RobTop shifted this jump pad in a later update to prevent this jump from happening. All of these changes, however, are very small changes compared to the major changes that happened to Stereo Madness regarding the path for the last secret coin. The old path used to be way more difficult to get through as it contained a very tight straight fly, which is probably the tightest flying parts in all RobTop levels. In case we don't count this coin, especially considering the fact that the game was only available on phone devices back then, which is why RobTop decided to nerf the entire part of the last coin in the first update that included the PC version. Update 1.9. Not only would RobTop make Geometry Dash playable on PC, but he would also change many parts in a previous level, called Hexagon Force. I like to think that most of these changes he made to Hexagon Force were to prevent newer players of disliking the game, because at the beginning of 1.9 there was a huge wave of new players incoming, and it was very important to retain all of these players, which is why RobTop made the following changes to Hexagon Force. After the level was already released, this structure was moved up by a few pixels to prevent high jumps of killing you. I've tried dying to these old structures and it seems like it had a very precise setup, but it was still possible, and I can see why RobTop decided to move it up a little bit to, of course, prevent players from dying there unexpectedly. This is only one of many changes done to Hexagon Force. For example, these saw blades were shifted by a lot to prevent the player from jumping between them and fall to the ground, leading the rest of the level to be completely free. RobTop also shifted this saw blade by a little bit and added another one in front of it, for the same reason as the previous one. All of these, and we are still not done with Hexagon Force, because RobTop also decided to move this block a little bit to the top to again prevent players from doing a higher jump than usual using the yellow jump rings. Deadlocked. This level was one of the main levels to receive major amounts of changes after it was already released. Considering that this is the most difficult level to ever be added to the main levels in Geometry Dash, it was clear that RobTop needed to nerf some parts in it. For example, here you can see the old structuring in this ball part, where RobTop had to slightly change the positioning of these hazard objects to prevent the player from dying by hitting the green jump ring very early. This, however, caused a new swag route to appear, which allows you to skip the whole teleportation portals as well as the green jump ring. Another change was in this part, after the first coin, where RobTop decided to change the spikes to give more room for the player to land, after blindly hitting the blue jump ring. This was a very important change as the spikes are the ones that go invisible. The last change that I was able to find in Deadlocked was in a robot part where the second secret coin is. And I found out that RobTop actually extended this platform to give the robot more space to land on, to prevent any unfortunate and unexpected deaths. These, however, are the changes that occurred to Deadlocked regarding its difficulty. However, at the beginning of 2.0, people found out that you can skip the 3x speed in the second wave part. But what's even more interesting is that people also found out that you can entirely skip the wave portal, leading you to go through the structure as an icon instead of a wave, which led to some really cool techniques. And as you might have guessed, this was changed immediately in the next patch update, making these skips undoable. RobTop added a second 3x speed above the normal one and made it invisible. This way you won't be able to skip it, and he also added soul blades on the top structure of the wave, which you can still die to this day. Another super interesting fact about changes that happened to the main levels in the past was regarding Clubstep. Right now, as a new player, in order to play this first demon level, you have to collect 10 secret coins. But believe it or not, in the update where this level came out, the required amount you needed was 20. This was changed in 2.0 to 10 coins instead. This is quite a crazy change, however, you won't believe the next one. Yeah, just watch until the end because it gets very nuts. When Xstep was released, these black blocks did not exist, but in a later update they seem to have appeared to improve the overall visuals of the level, even though they are only visible on the edge of the screen for a few frames. I couldn't exactly find in which update these were added, but we can safely say that RobTop did come back to Xstep in a later update to add these blocks, and that is everything changed in Xstep. Except, not really, because Xstep was released before 1.6, and 1.6 was the update that introduced the secret coins, meaning that it must have been changed to include the paths for the 3 secret coins. And yes, indeed, here we can see the new changes made to it. However, I'm not gonna cover every single coin change because I don't think they are quite as interesting as other changes, but here you can see some of the paths that needed to be changed for the coins to take place. One very interesting thing I noticed while looking for these changes is that base after base had the spike shifted by one grid block to the right. Even though this completely has nothing to do with the coin round, it's still interesting to think about. Like, just why? And while looking throughout all the main levels to see if there are any changes, I noticed that RobTop did some very weird and unexplainable changes to many levels, including Theory of Everything 1. He decided to move this star and add a bigger cloud instead of a smaller one. I thought about why he would do that, but I couldn't really come up with a reason. But what makes this even more interesting is that this was actually the only change to happen to Theory of Everything 1, meaning that this was not an accidental edit, but it was actually intentional. And the top 2 most weirdest change in the main levels was in Electrodynamix. For some absurd reason, RobTop decided to put a smaller soul blade in here instead of a bigger one. Also, while editing this, I played Electrodynamix and I realized that this was a very important change as it prevents your player from dying after collecting the coin and jumping late. Remember that Electrodynamix was added in 1.6, meaning that it already had the coins when RobTop decided to change the soul blade. And here we go, the final and most unexplainable change that has ever occurred to any main level. It was in Back on Track. For some reason, RobTop added these 3 blocks above the normal path and removed them in a later update. These 3 blocks are not visible in the normal path, unlike the subscribe button that you should smash. If you like this video, feel free to support me at shop.XcreatorGoal.com, and you get this very awesome product in which you can basically automatically edit your YouTube videos. It basically just automates very boring parts, adds effects, adds memes. It's a one-time payment and you will get every update for free, so make sure to get it right now because there's only like 5 days for the sale.